Okay, in the 13.2 extension, we are going to be talking about factoring expressions. Factor as a verb means to divide. So we've already done this before earlier in the year. We've factored out the greatest common factor from expressions. So let's practice that first. So you're gonna get an expression like, number 1, 24x minus 18. And our job is to find the greatest common factor of 24 and 18. Now, at this part in the year, you probably already know just by looking at these numbers what the greatest common factor is. If you don't know, you can use your prime factorization or your ladder method to determine what the greatest common factor is. So it might look something like, oh, both of these numbers can be divided by 2. 2 into 24 is 12. 2 into 18 is 9. Oh, 3 goes into both of these numbers 4 times and 3 times. We draw our G and we multiply those to find our greatest common factor as 6. So that means that we're gonna factor out a 6 from 24x and 18. So it would look like this. Again, factor means to divide. 24 divided by 6 is 4. Drop down the x, drop down your subtraction. 18 divided by 6 is 3. So remember, when we factor expressions, we write the expression as a product of its factors. So we need to drop down our 6. That's one factor. Our second factor is 4x minus 3. So this would be what our answer looks like. Again, that should be a review from earlier in the year. Okay, let's try just one more of those just to freshen up that skill. So we'll start with the expression 36a plus 48. I know the greatest common factor of 36 and 48 is 12, so that's what I have to divide by. 36 divided by 12 is 3. Drop down the a, drop down the addition. 48 divided by 12 is 4. Again, we have to express it as a product of the factors. So drop down your 12. That's one factor. Drop down your 3a plus 4. That's its second factor. And this is what your answer should look like. Okay, in part 2, the idea is exactly the same. We're gonna factor, we're gonna divide. But in part 2, we are going to factor out the coefficient of the variable. Let's see if I can spell this right. Okay, so let's try a couple of these together. You're gonna find that they're gonna be pretty easy, but there might be some tedious computation that you'll have to do to arrive at your answer. So the first question we're gonna deal with is 1/2 x plus 3/2. And when we factor out the coefficient, reminder, the coefficient is the number by which a variable is multiplied. In other words, that number right in front of x is our coefficient, and that's what we have to divide by. So we'll set it up just like these. We'll put our 1/2 on the outside. 1/2 divided by 1/2 is 1. Or just x. You can have a 1x, that's fine. Drop down the addition. Remember, factor means to divide, so we have to factor out a 1/2 from 3/2. You might be able to do that mentally. If not, you'll work it out off to the side. Division changes to multiplication. 1/2 changes into 2/1. I can reduce these, multiply straight across, and I get 3. So 3/2 factored out 1/2 is 3. Again, we have to write it as a product of its factors. So we'll drop down the 1/2. That's one factor. And drop down the x plus 3. There's our second factor. So this is what your answer should look like. Let's try just a couple more to make sure that we've got it, because some of them will involve negatives. Okay, part 2, number 2. Let's put a decimal in there just to have a little bit of fun with it. 2.4a minus 9.6. And we're factoring out the coefficient. The coefficient is the number in front of that variable. So we're gonna factor out, divide out a 2.4 from both terms. Well, 2.4 divided by 2.4 is just 1, or you can express it as a. Drop down your subtraction symbol. Then we have to factor out a 2.4 from the second term. Well, you may have to work this out. 9.6 divided by 2.4, hop and hop. 24 into 96. Yay, it goes in evenly 4 times. So when I take 9.6 and I factor out, divide the 2.4, I get 4. We're gonna express it as a product. 2.4 is our first factor. A minus 4 is our second. Okay, let's do 2 more. Number 3. Negative 7x minus 21. Okay, so be careful. The coefficient is a negative. So we have to divide each of those terms by a negative 7. Negative 7 is the coefficient. It's what we're factoring out. So to show this, divide negative 7, divide negative 7. Okay, so negative 7 divided by negative 7 is 1, or just x. Circle your subtraction, drop it down. 21 divided by negative 7 is negative 3. Put it in parentheses to separate it from your subtraction symbol. Okay, when we express it as a product of its factors, we'll drop down the negative 7 like so. However, this is not the best way to write it. So instead of showing subtracting by negative 3, we're gonna show adding the opposite of negative 3, which is positive 3. That looks a little better and a little simpler. Okay, last one we're gonna show together. We're gonna show a negative and a fraction. So negative 2/9 a plus 2/3. We're factoring out the coefficient, which is negative 2/9. So we're gonna show the coefficient is what we're dividing by, and show it here. Divide negative 2/9, divide negative 2/9. Well, these two will divide out to 1, or 1a. You can write it as just a. Circle your addition, drop it down, and then we need to work out this division here. I'm gonna work it out off to the side. So 2/3, division changes to multiplication, and 2/9 changes to 9/2, and it was a negative. Well, this is kind of nice. These 2's can reduce to 1's. 3 goes into 3 once, 3 goes into 9 3 times. I'm gonna put that negative symbol up there. Multiply straight across. 1 times 3 is 3. Put on your negative. And the denominator we don't even need to write, because 1 times 1 is just 1. Okay, so drop in that quotient, and then we need to express it as a product of its factors. So negative 2/9 was what we factored out. What's left is a plus negative 3, Or you might see it written, and it doesn't mean it's wrong, it's just another way of writing it. -2/9 a minus 3, okay? Adding the opposite is the same thing as subtracting. Okay, try out the practice.